Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for tuning in today. Just a quick introduction. My name is Teresa Homsey, and I'm with the Michigan Clinicians for Climate Action. So we represent more than 400 Michigan health professionals, including nurses, public health officials, physicians, and so on, who support decarbonization and electrification. So we recognize that pollution from fossil fuels directly harms the public's well-being and that greenhouse gas emissions are resulting in a climate-driven public health crisis. So, as such, it's no surprise that we are disturbed by a series of actions from the current administration that undermine scientific expertise and seek to destroy our mechanisms to keep pollution in check. Today, we're focused on the EPA's attempt to stop the 2024 PM 2.5 standards from going into effect, reverting back to weaker protections. So, some definitions first, and our speakers will elaborate on all of these points. PM 2.5, or fine particulate matter, or sometimes called soot, are tiny, basically invisible airborne particles that are a common air pollutant emitted by vehicles, power plants, and wildfire smoke. So these past summers, when we've had those orange, hazy skies, that's what happens when you have a large concentration of PM2.5 in the air, and it makes our air quality unsafe. Our speakers are going to elaborate more on the health impacts, but generally speaking, PM2.5 is especially concerning because it can penetrate deep into your lungs and bloodstream, and it's associated with a myriad of respiratory, cardiovascular, and neurological issues. The National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or the NAAQS, are the cornerstone of our air pollution regulation. The NAAQS set our understanding of what's considered unsafe to breathe for 6 outdoor air pollutants, and they enable states and local governments to enforce pollution controls. So, per the Clean Air Act, the NAAQS are meant to be reviewed every 5 years and updated to reflect the best available science. But that's not what is happening today. The NAAQS for PM.25 were just updated in 2024, but the current EPA is arguing to a federal court that the previous administration didn't go through the proper channels to implement these standards. Representing a group of health professionals, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not involved in the case, so I can't directly respond to this legal claim, but I think that the EPA's argument is frankly absurd, given that the agency has made it clear through their actions over the past year that they're not interested in statutory enforcement or even pretending to support their stated mission of, quote, protecting human health and the environment. Just this month, the EPA said it would no longer consider public health costs or account for how many human lives are lost in its regulatory decision making. This is relevant when we're talking about the NAAQS for PM2.5 because in 2024, the EPA estimated that its stronger protections would result in 4,500 avoided premature deaths and save $46 billion in public health net benefits. 4,500 deaths and $46 billion in public health costs. That's the data that the current EPA is now wanting to disregard. And I think the reasoning is obvious. If a standard can save thousands of lives, eliminating it amounts to letting thousands of people die. And for the EPA, that's an uncomfortable, inconvenient truth. So now they're trying to sow doubt in the scientific reasoning that gives us those estimates. But our stance is that even if those benefits of the 2024 standards are marginal, it's all in our best interest to reduce pollution as much as possible, whether it's 4,500 deaths that we're avoiding or 4,000 or 3,500, because at the end of the day, we're not talking about numbers, but people. So today, we hope that the court can see reason, and I also hope that it's not lost on the public that the people who are supposed to protect you and at the EPA are frankly failing you. So with that, I'm going to cede the stage to Kendra Wide, who is a critical care nurse based in Washtenaw County And just some ground rules. Everyone right now on the call is currently unable to unmute themselves, but as we finish our speaking portions, you'll be able to do so to ask questions. So Kendra, take it away.
Thank you, Teresa. Rolling back national ambient air quality standards for particulate matter will not make America healthy again. This is a clear giveaway to corporate polluters by Administrator Zeldin, and most certainly is not in line with the mission of the EPA. My name is Kendra Wide, and I am a practicing ICU RN in Washtenaw County, where I see firsthand the direct impacts of air pollution and climate change on health. People living with heart and/or lung conditions will feel the impacts of these rollbacks and need stronger protections, not weaker ones. In 2011, a landmark peer-reviewed study analyzing the previous 30 years of research was published by the National Institutes of Health. It concluded then what remains true today: fine particulate matter is damaging to our heart, lungs, and brain. Particulate matter, or soot pollution, is a toxic soup of vapors, gases, and particles that are so small that they pass from the lungs into the bloodstream during oxygen exchange. From there, they travel throughout the body, triggering inflammation and damage to the following systems. In the heart, both short and long-term exposure to soot increases the risk of heart disease and premature death from cardiovascular conditions. Inflammation damages vessels that supply oxygen to the heart, resulting in blockages to critical blood flow, causing cell death. In the lungs, soot pollution triggers cell damage and tissue injury, resulting in the exacerbation of asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD. As levels of soot pollution increase, so do asthmatic symptoms, rescue inhaler use, missed school days, and respiratory hospitalizations and deaths. In the brain, the inflammation from soot pollution exposure has been linked to an increased risk of stroke and dementia. In 2011, there was, and remains today, consensus among research scientists on the associations between soot pollution exposure and increased cardiovascular, respiratory, and cerebrovascular disease and death. So why is the EPA rolling back soot standards despite these known health harms? The science has not changed, but the politics have. Zeldin's EPA claims that they are revisiting the soot pollution standards due to costs. The costs to which they are referring are those that will be incurred by manufacturing and industry to keep the public safe and the environment healthy. They estimate the stricter soot standards adopted in 2024 will cost $7 billion over the next 20 years. They state that these costs are almost incalculable because estimates cannot fully account for all the controls and emissions reductions needed to meet the standard in some places. And this will hinder American manufacturing with burdensome Clean Air Act permitting requirements that deter economic growth. I ask you, when did the EPA stop considering the costs of air pollution on human health? When did the EPA question their statutory authority to uphold the Clean Air Act? When did the mission of the EPA stray? The answer is when the Trump administration took over and a fox was put in charge of watching over the henhouse. According to the EPA of 2024, the one that valued public and environmental health, stronger soot pollution protections would result in the significant public health net benefits stated earlier. Where is the economic calculation for these missed work and school days, for the costs of increased asthma attacks, heart attacks, hospitalizations, premature deaths? The current EPA doesn't calculate this because it's considered the cost of doing business. Healthcare professionals care deeply and are deeply committed about the public and its health. As a nurse, I can tell you that the cost will be more disease and death in an already stressed and failing healthcare system. There will be more hospitalizations on poor air quality days, more missed days of school and work, and more premature loss of life. I can tell you what it looks like when someone living with asthma or COPD has been breathing poor air quality in the extreme heat of Michigan's summers or coldest winters, and how they gasp and struggle to breathe air into inflamed and constricted lungs, and how the cost of a hospitalization sets them back physically and financially, and the ripple effects it has on their families, their jobs, and their livelihoods. That number two may be incalculable, but it's more humane and more in line with the mission of the EPA. Weakening protections for soot pollution isn't following the science and demonstrates a departure from EPA's mission. The science has not changed. Stronger protections save lives. I'm going to pass it to Kezia with the American Lung Association. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Kendra. My name is Kezia. I serve as the Director of Advocacy for the American Lung Association. Um, in 2023 and 2024, the American Lung Association united the health community in calling on the EPA to strengthen the national ambient air quality standards for fine particulate matter. Now that stronger standards are in place, we believe that they should be implemented and enforced without delay. We're disappointed with the current EPA leadership. Uh, we're disappointed that the current EPA leadership has tried to undermine these strong PM 2.5 standards. PM 2.5 is smaller than the diameter of a human hair, but it packs a punch in terms of its health impacts. We know that particle pollution kills thousands of people in the United States each year, and rollbacks to the 2024 standards would endanger communities, especially those who live near pollution sources um, like power plants and busy roads. In our State of the Air report from last year, the Lung Association found that Detroit received a grade of D for particle pollution, with the average number of unhealthy air days per year increasing from 5.8 days in 2024 in our 2024 report, pardon me, to 8.5 days in our 2025 report. Particle pollution causes serious health harms, including breathing problems, asthma attacks, cardiovascular problems, lung cancer, and fetal harm. Children, seniors, people with lung or heart disease, and people who work outdoors are disproportionately at risk, as are people in low income communities and many communities of color who are exposed to higher levels of particle pollution. Any individual with a chronic condition will tell you how costly it is to manage their symptoms and live a fulfilled life. If EPA doesn't implement the strong 2024 standards, the agency could leave these individuals with worse health outcomes and higher healthcare costs. In 2024, the Lung Association released a poll showing voters overwhelmingly supporting stricter standards for particle pollution. The poll administered found that 78% of voters support the stricter standards for particle pollution, also known as fine particles or soot. Stronger standards are popular with the public and indeed will save lives. The Lung Association believes that to protect public health, they should be implemented and enforced without delay. Doing so is a necessary part in fulfilling the EPA's mission of protecting human health and providing clean air for all. I'll now pass it on to Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to share space with all of you today. Especially, I know there's so much going on in our country, but we also, in the midst of all of that is happening, we want to make sure that we are fighting for clean air for our environment and the right to access clean water. You all know I'm talking to the choir, but I think it's important for media and folks to understand the Environmental Protection Agency has abandoned its mandate to protect human health and environment in order to serve Trump's corporate polluter donors. This is not an exaggeration. Administrator Zeldin brags about it. Instead of taking lives lost and public health benefits into account in its rulemaking, all they care about is whether the worst corporate polluters will make more money. Trump's Polluter Protection Agency, that's what we call it, is consciously sacrificing our communities for corporate greed. They're rolling back new federal PM 2.5 standards, which we already know didn't go far enough, and we were already compromising with the industry in that sense. So we know this is a direct attack on our health and quality of life. So I'm proud to join with the environmental justice community and public health advocates here today to spread the word about this assault on our communities so that we can get organized and fight back. I know these past 13 months of this administration, and it feels longer, have been overwhelmingly terrible. I know it's hard to feel hopeful, hard to feel right now hopeful and inspired. But I want everyone to here to understand that these fascists and oligarchs are not invincible. These billionaires may have the money, but we have the people, and we're united. And I know that we'll be able to fight back and defeat them. We've seen this in Minnesota this week and across the country, the incredible power we have when we get active and get organized. We are our own best hope. It might be hard to believe, but this administration is terrified of us. They truly are. Their policies are deeply unpopular, and fear is their greatest weapon. The strength that they are trying to protect is a flimsy cover for their pathetic weaknesses. I'm grateful for everyone here today who is organizing our communities to fight for our public health, our environment, our rights to breathe clean air and drink clean water. I know as a girl that grew up in Southwest Detroit how incredibly dehumanizing it felt that nobody cared about me breathing clean air, that I could have clean water. And we know that the progress isn't linear, that it doesn't move in a straight line. There will be setbacks, but that's when we fight back together and we get more organized. Nobody but Trump's donors and their pathetic servants in Washington, D.C., yes, many of my colleagues, they want dirtier air that makes them and their children sick. It is actually when we cut and when we do cut through the BS and talk directly to our families, to our communities, and teach them about what is at stake. And clean air truly isn't a partisan issue. I have talked to those families. Many, all of folks do not want our lands, our air, our water sacrificed. We're never going to stop fighting for real environmental protection, as you all know, and real enforcement. People pass bills, but we have to make sure they enforce them. The polluters are fighting for more money, but we're fighting for our lives. And we're going to win because we don't have any other choice. So stay strong and continue to fight back.
All right, thank you. So with that, we'll open the floor to questions. Just raise your hand or put it in the chat. And if you'd like to speak your question out loud, I'll ask you to unmute. All right, Kyle.
Hi, Kyle Davidson, Michigan Advance. Thanks, Teresa, for putting this together and Representative for joining us today. I was wondering, I'm sure many of us are familiar, but for those who may not be, Representative, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how, this rollback of this standard would particularly affect residents in your district. Detroit does face quite a high pollution burden. So I was wondering, if you could talk a little bit about that, as well as, some of the health impacts, as well as I know health access can also be an issue.
Yeah, I know, Kyle, you know this. Wayne County hasn't met Clean Air Act standards in years. And we already know that our own state environmental agency has been rolling back some of those protections as well and how they calculate sulfur dioxide standards, ozone standards for many of our families that live in what they call, not me, they call this sacrifice zones. These are folks that are completely, surrounded by, U.S. steel companies, by petroleum refineries, you name it, and they're all tucked in, and there's schools and parks and families and communities that live in those areas. And for them, they already get the bare minimum of those protections. This would make it so much more worse. Kendra talked about absenteeism and how that's connected to dirty air. When I tell people, like, kids can't learn if they're hungry, they also can't learn if they're breathing dirty air. And so I think it's really important to know we're already at the bare minimum where we're still survivor mode in Wayne County specifically. And we're already seeing the impacts, not only in the rise of asthma, the rise of respiratory issues in some of our communities. But I have the south end of Dearborn. We have the big 800-pound gorilla in the room with the Rouge plant right there with the steel company right there in our shadows. And, there's two schools right there and a few parks in that neighborhood. And, talking to parents and talking to others who are petrified that they're already getting hurt, that it would get worse as we see these rollbacks happen. And so we already know many of the corporate polluters around our communities violate their own air permits. Now I feel like they're just never going to be held accountable, and it's never going to have the kind of enforcement that needs to happen. And with this rollback, again, it was the bare minimum of what we wanted. Of course, we wanted more, and now they're just rolling back just even that bare minimum. And who benefits? Not the public, not the taxpayer, not the communities that we're supposed to be protecting. We're protecting the industry, the shareholders of these companies.
All right, and then I see Kirti has her hand up, so I'll ask you to unmute.
Hi, I'm Kirti Gopal with Inside Climate News. Thank you all for being here. And thanks, Congressman, for bringing up the Rouge Steel plant. I was going to ask if there are any examples, could be that plant or somewhere else, that any of you can speak to where some of these air quality standards have actually protected communities or been able to rein in some of these facilities, or if there's any particular facilities that you are or community members are particularly looking at as potentially getting worse if these standards are taken back.
Let's see if Kendra wants to answer that, but I can give examples. So on the east side, we have Stellantis. So again, I know right now many of our community members there are working with the Great Lakes Law Center and others about just the odor in the community. We haven't been able, I think, to measure what the output and pollutants there are, but even getting rid of, again, this bare minimum of protection, I don't know if we're going to be able to get those answers for those families in that area. But it's been unbearable. Many of them can't even, when the weather permits, to have barbecues in their backyard, to be able to live their lives. They don't even sit in their front porches anymore. They're basically taking away their livelihood. When you think of, Marathon Petroleum Refinery, same thing. This massive number of residents there continue to, call our Michigan Environmental Department here, Eagle, to make complaints about odors, especially when it's so concentrated that, many of them tell me that they complain about the nose hairs and everything in there. And again, it being able to not even measure the PM, but also to not have that trigger to at least measure those things when they do their air permit applications. That's when those PM measures are going to be discussed and evaluated. The fact that they don't even comply with their own current one, and now we're just basically going to roll back, we'll just have the status quo of people just getting sick even more. This is years of us saying, give us anything better than what we already have. And we fought so hard for these PM 2.5 levels. And now, I don't know if I could be able to face my families and say, unfortunately, they rolled back even that little progress that we had, and that we're going to have to live under these conditions still, and that we're going to have to worry about our kids and the adults in the community getting these respiratory issues and not being able to fully live their lives because of, again, the deregulation and the rollback.
Kendra, Kezia, did y'all also want to weigh in on that? I know with the American Lung Association, I don't believe the State of the Air report covers specific sites as far as like point source and emitters. But I know that you can go county by county and identify where there's exceedances with PM 2.5. And I believe that with the 2024 standards that were, in action that were going to be implemented soon here, that I believe 3 Michigan counties would have achieved or entertained non-attainment with the stricter standards. So that's Wayne County, Kalamazoo, and Kent. But Kezia, if you have anything to add from the State of the Air report that might be helpful. And just for reference, you were a little quiet, so if you can try to move closer to your microphone when speaking.
Thank you for that. I hope you all can hear me better now. I hope it's better. I'm sorry for that. But yeah, our state of the air report, it doesn't show specific emitters, but it showed that the difference between our 2024 report, which covered 2 years before that and our 2025 report from last year, which also covered 2 years prior to that, which encompassed um, the Canadian wildfires over 2023, it shows that in the 2024 report, we had 5.8 unhealthy air days, and in 2025 report, it increased to 8.5 unhealthy air days. So in our report, we really evaluate the number of unhealthy air days, which really affect the day-to-day quality of life that individuals who are exposed to these toxins experience.
I'll just add on to Kezia's and Representative Tlaib's comments. Just want to reiterate that again, Representative Tlaib did mention that the standards that were set in 2024 were really something that were much weaker than public health advocates were pushing for. And it was really a compromise, to say the least, that we accepted these. We felt that this was progress, at least in the right direction, even if they weren't as strict as what the World Health Organization even recommends. So the science worldwide recommends stricter standards than what the 2024 standards were put in place. And we're trying to this EPA is trying to roll them back further. I'm going to put a map in the chat from EDF that shows the specific corporations that did request a pollution pass from this administration. And that can give you an idea of who may be looking and what areas may be impacted by these pollution standards being rolled back. And then also, I just want to highlight and then maybe Teresa, you can speak to this a little bit more, because I know that there's been a request for comments from health professionals on the Levi cement grinding plant. That is also a source of particulate matter, and that could very well be impacted by these lower soot standards, the health in that community.
So Kendra, I don't feel the most confident on the Levi facility, but I would add that we have seen wildfire smoke incidents happening more frequently over the last few years. And so that is a non-point source. We can't control wildfire smoke directly. I mean, there's upstream solutions and policies that we could implement to try to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and thus, reduce wildfires events. But with those kinds of environmental drivers occurring more frequently, that just means that it's in our best interest to further implement pollution controls over things that we can control, and where we can reduce emissions. So that's one thing that I would add, because these soot standards, whatever an industry is emitting, it's not acting in isolation, and we have to look at what we can and can't control immediately. So that's one note I'd add. But I wanted to make sure that there was, if there's anyone else on the call who has any questions.
I would like to offer any impacted residents, if any media want to follow up with my team, Derek will put his email address. But if you want to talk to residents without titles, residents that live in these shadows and of some of these corporate polluters, please do reach out to us. I think getting input from the people that are directly impacted would be very important here.
And seeing no questions, unless someone's working on the chat, I'm going to allow our speakers to, if there's any other closing thoughts or things that you'd like to add, you can weigh in here, and then we can close the Zoom line. Okay, Carol, I can get you to unmute, or I maybe you're typing it away.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you everyone for the time this afternoon. I wonder if there's room or any potential for states to set their own standards that could be perhaps stricter than the EPA's, and if there are any states that have moved that direction.
I can't speak to the legality challenges that could be undergone if states are stricter, but you can look at California as trying to have cleaner air standards than the rest of the country. The big challenge with having state-specific standards is that air pollution doesn't stay put.
I think it's also really important to know much of the Environmental Protection Agency oversight, directed, responsibilities is delegated to states. And states do the public hearing, public engagement. States get to decide whether or not they're in compliance. And I feel like very much under not only this current administration, state administration, but also previous ones, from being a state rep and now a congresswoman, the permission to pollute department, that's what it feels like. We have yet to see any denial of any permits, even after evidence of public health impact. One of the things that I feel like the state of Michigan needs to do and is permissible to do in my, authority, they should talk to their legal authority, but I think the public health department needs to work hand in hand with Eagle. They need to be able to make decisions. Is this an environmental justice community where they already have 200 plus, air permits, and that's a real life scenario right now, and whether or not Marathon Oil Refinery expanding protects public health and the environment, whether or not, again, the continuation of not once, but three concessions and where they have consent agreements because they've been in violation of their air permits. Enforcement still is very heavy on the states, and we feel very much that members of the legislature and others can fully fund oversight and enforcement, so we have enough Wayne County inspectors on the ground, but also to truly enforce these protections. I feel very much the state continues to work with these corporate polluters to massage their applications to the point where we have little to say, and a lot of this is already decided before they even come to the public, and that's something that I know the states can stop doing.
Yeah, I would agree with Congresswoman Tlaib's answer, and just to even add, the EPA also sets the tone for the states as well as you mentioned. So the state standards must at least be as strict as the EPA's standards. So as of right now, if the EPA is not trying to uphold these standards and it's becoming more lax, that really impacts how much the states can do as well. So yeah.
I'd also add here that I don't think any of us on the call would oppose the state implementing stronger air pollution standards, but it becomes a matter of their capacity to enforce it and regulate it. And also, like the federal government kind of carries a big stick. I feel, have more legal prowess to actually, prosecute people who are violating. I mean, this
But
isn't.
our state environmental protection agency sends it to them.
Mhm.
So it starts with us, the state. The state sends it to EPA. EPA sends it to Department of Justice. I only want to say this, that you're right, Teresa. I don't want to interrupt, but the states can decide to take it up a notch. That's what I'm saying. We can be heavy, more accountability work that I don't think is being done in the state of Michigan.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. It's we'd like to see everyone step up. I guess in short, that's probably how I would phrase it is everyone could do a little bit more and it's in everyone else's best interest. And to Kendra's point, air pollution, it travels as well. And just because we can improve air quality in the state of Michigan, we don't want to neglect our neighbors either. It shouldn't be, a privilege or a luxury that, hey, we're taking it seriously in Michigan, but the rest of the country, it's just, outside our scope. I don't see our neighboring states that way.
And whoever asked the question, I think asked the state, when's the last time you denied an air permit application?
Okay, well, barring no more final questions, thanks to everyone who tuned into the call. Thank you to Kezia, to Kendra, to Congresswoman Tlaib. We really appreciate your time, and we'll be posting a recording of this as well. It's already live streaming on YouTube, so it should be out there. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.